thought you knew Night of the Living Dead, but the 1990 remake directed by Tom Savini is a beast of its own. Behind the graveyard screams and flesh-eating chaos lies a tangled web of cut footage, studio meddling, ruined effects, and actor improvisations. If you've only watched this once, you're missing a lot. Let's dig up 20 weird and crazy facts about this misunderstood horror remake, starting with what the studio didn't want you to see. Fact 1. The studio butchered Savini's original vision. Tom Savini, the legendary effects wizard behind Dawn of the Dead and Friday the 13th, was finally handed the director's chair for the Night of the Living Dead remake. He approached the project as a labor of love, deeply loyal to George Romero and intent on honoring the original while pushing the gore and atmosphere to new levels. But after he turned in his cut, the studio took it away, hacked it down, and stripped out some of the best horror moments. Savini had envisioned a darker, more psychologically intense film, complete with lingering violence, existential dread, and a far more brutal ending. But in the end, executives demanded a cleaner, more commercially viable product. What fans saw in theaters wasn't what Savini had planned, and he's spoken about the frustration for decades. Somewhere, in a studio vault, his original director's cut still exists, unseen and heavily rumored to be gorier, longer, and way more disturbing. Fact 2. Tony Todd rewrote the character Ben with his own philosophy. Tony Todd wasn't just filling the shoes of Dwayne Jones. He was reinventing Ben with layers of emotional weight and personal nuance. Where the original Ben was assertive and confrontational, Todd chose a different route. Quiet strength, patient resolve, and the exhausted anger of a man who'd spent a lifetime trying to be heard. Todd even worked with Savini to modify lines and tweak scenes to reflect Ben as a more grounded, pained, and human character. That wasn't just acting. It was a reimagining of who Ben could be in the 1990s, where the racial politics of the original still lingered but had evolved. His performance gave the film a gravitas that critics later praised as one of the remake's strongest points. And the final tragedy of Ben's fate hit even harder because Todd made him feel real, someone who had already endured more than just one night of horror. Fact 3. The first zombie was a horror icon in disguise. When the first zombie stumbles through the graveyard and attacks Johnny, he might look like just another ghoul, but that's actually horror royalty. The actor in that heavy zombie makeup is none other than Bill Moseley, fresh off his unforgettable role as Chop Top in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Savini personally asked him to take on the part, knowing Moseley could bring the right mixture of grotesque and weird to kick off the terror. What's impressive is how little screen time he has, but still makes an impact. That eerie stumble, the twitching head, the relentless groan, Moseley infused it all with manic energy. Fans of 80s horror often miss this cameo on first watch, but once you realize it's him, the opening hits differently. It sets the tone for a remake filled with hidden treats for horror buffs. Fact 4. Jason Voorhees has a cameo. Sort of. You'd never expect to find Jason Voorhees lurking inside a Romero zombie flick, but Savini couldn't help himself. When Barbara explores the upstairs bedroom and discovers a rotting corpse in bed, hardcore horror fans might get a strange sense of déjà vu. The corpse's swollen face, waterlogged look, and mangled features bear an uncanny resemblance to Jason from Friday the 13th, the final chapter, a character Savini designed. It's not just coincidence. Savini confirmed that he deliberately sculpted the face to echo his earlier work as a sly nod to his slasher roots. He never intended for viewers to spot it easily, but those with sharp eyes and deep horror knowledge picked up on it. It's one of those nerdy, behind-the-scenes winks that makes rewatching the movie a treasure hunt for Easter eggs, and shows how Savini's DNA is all over the film, even in the shadows. Fact 5. Patricia Tallman did all her own stunts. Patricia Tallman wasn't hired just to scream and look scared. She was brought in because she could throw herself through windows, fall downstairs, and wield firearms like she meant it. As a trained stunt woman with credits on Jurassic Park, Army of Darkness, and Star Trek, Tallman had already proven herself in the world of action. But for Night of the Living Dead, she stepped into Barbara's boots and gave the character an edge that fans weren't expecting. This Barbara wasn't catatonic. She was calculating, fierce, and took control. When she dives through a window or fends off zombies with precision, that's not a stunt double. It's Tallman doing the real thing. Her physical performance helped reshape Barbara from a passive bystander into one of the most empowered women in zombie movie history. She wasn't just a scream queen, she was a scream warrior. Fact 6. The gore was censored to protect the R rating. Tom Savini is known for going big. Blood geysers, jaw-ripping kills, exploding heads. But Night of the Living Dead was a rare case where his work was deliberately toned down. The studio wanted an R rating that wouldn't scare off mainstream audiences, and that meant trimming some of his most intense kills. We're talking about full-on disembowelments, headshots with visible brain matter, and prolonged zombie feasting scenes that got the axe. Savini later admitted that nearly 20% of the gore he shot was either trimmed or never even developed beyond test footage. It was a crushing blow, especially considering fans expected a bloodbath from the man who practically invented modern gore. What made it worse was that no unrated or director's cut has ever officially surfaced, leaving fans with only hints of what could have been a grittier, gorier version of an already intense remake. Fact 7. Zombie designs were based on real corpses. Savini's approach to zombie effects in this remake was rooted in realism, sometimes uncomfortably so. Rather than relying on exaggerated or cartoony designs, he and his team studied real forensic photos of human decomposition to guide their work. They categorized zombies into fresh, mid-rot, and severely decayed, each with different textures, colors, and movements. Some had peeling skin and cloudy eyes, others had bloated limbs or exposed bone. The team even used layered latex to mimic skin sloughing off in real time. Each zombie was like a walking biology lesson, and the attention to detail made them feel disturbingly plausible. That's why even without gallons of gore, the undead in this version still give off serious creep factor. They're not just monsters. They look like something you could stumble across in a morgue or during a very bad day at the CDC. Fact 8. The house interior was built in a gymnasium. It might look like a real farmhouse surrounded by cornfields, but the interior of the house in Night of the Living Dead wasn't a house at all. The crew constructed it from scratch inside a massive gymnasium outside Pittsburgh. Why? Because real homes are cramped, unpredictable, and hard to shoot in. A gym gave the team full control. They could remove walls, raise ceilings, and install custom lighting rigs without restriction. Every stairwell, window, and floorboard was designed for cinematic movement. This allowed for those sweeping camera shots during zombie attacks and dramatic angles when characters argue or fight. The illusion is so convincing that most viewers never suspect the truth, that what they're watching is a fully manufactured set. It's movie magic at its finest, built to serve both story and logistics without sacrificing that rustic, middle-of-nowhere feel. Fact 9. The original ending was darker and more emotional. In the version we got, the ending hits hard, but it could have hit harder. Savini's original cut showed Barbara struggling emotionally with Ben's death and confronting the redneck militia in a far more ambiguous light. The idea was to critique the us versus them mindset that develops in survival scenarios, showing how even the living become monstrous under pressure. But studio executives feared audiences wouldn't respond well to such a bleak conclusion. They pushed for a cleaner wrap-up, softening the ending and removing scenes that suggested Barbara had morally compromised herself. It was a huge missed opportunity to explore the same social commentary Romero had baked into the original. What could have been a gut punch became more of a shock twist. Good, but not quite as soul-crushing as Savini intended. Fact 10. Filming the basement scene was miserable. That tense, claustrophobic showdown in the basement wasn't just emotionally intense, it was physically exhausting to shoot. The basement was built as a tiny, sweltering crawl space with low ceilings and no ventilation. Heat from the set lights quickly turned it into an oven, and the actors had to wedge themselves into awkward positions to hit their marks. On multiple occasions, crew members had to step away due to dizziness and dehydration. One camera operator actually passed out during a take, prompting an emergency break in filming. The discomfort translated into the performances. You can feel the claustrophobia, the tension, the desperation. What viewers experienced in that scene wasn't just good acting. It was real physical misery, captured on film, making it one of the most authentic feeling sequences in the movie. Fact 11. Romero secretly appears in a photo. George Romero doesn't physically appear in the 1990 remake, but his spirit and face still made it into the film. In one clever Easter egg, A blurry photo pinned to the farmhouse wall shows a protest scene with none other than George Romero standing in the background. It's not directly referenced, and the camera never lingers on it, but if you pause and squint, it's clearly him. Savini added the photo as a tribute to Romero, who helped write the remake screenplay but took a hands-off role during filming. It's a blink and you'll miss it gesture, but one that speaks volumes about the respect Savini had for his mentor. Hardcore fans have even speculated the image symbolizes Romero's silent presence watching over the chaos, much like a godfather of the undead. Always there, even when he's not on screen. Fact 12. The opening cemetery was filmed in 2 states. That eerie opening at the cemetery, with the crumbling tombstones and creeping fog, wasn't filmed all in one place. The production team actually stitched it together from 2 separate locations in different states. The actual gravestones were filmed near Evans City, Pennsylvania, close to the original 1968 filming site. But the stretch of road where Barbara runs and the trees she crashes through were shot in Ohio, where the terrain and lighting work better for stunts. The editing team carefully blended the footage so it felt like one continuous sequence, and unless you knew the geography, you'd never spot the cut. It's a brilliant example of how horror movies use geography like clay, twisting and sculpting different places into one seamless nightmare. What starts as a nostalgic callback quickly turns into a frantic, multi-state zombie sprint. Fact 13. The gas pump explosion nearly went wrong. You remember that scene where Tom and Judy Rose try to refuel the truck and everything goes horribly wrong? That fireball wasn't a special effect. It was real, practical pyrotechnics, and it almost went off the rails. The effects crew used too much accelerant, and the resulting explosion was much larger than expected. The blast knocked a crew member off their feet and sent nearby gear flying. For a few seconds, panic broke out as everyone scrambled to check for injuries and stop the fire from spreading. Luckily, no one was seriously hurt, but the footage captured that day was so intense, Savini decided to keep it in the final cut. It wasn't just cinematic. It was accidental adrenaline caught on camera. The danger you feel in that moment, it wasn't acting. It was real fear. Fact 14. Real amputees played some of the zombies. One of the creepiest things about the zombies in the remake is how real they feel. And in some cases, they were. Savini cast real amputees to play zombies missing limbs or dragging themselves across the floor. One of the most iconic ghouls who crawls forward with no legs was portrayed by a Vietnam veteran who had lost both limbs in combat. The result wasn't just more convincing, it added a chilling authenticity that prosthetics can't always replicate. These performers brought real movement patterns and weight to their roles, and Savini made sure they were treated with respect on set. For audiences, it added an extra layer of horror, not because of shock value, but because these zombies moved with a disturbing sense of realism. You couldn't fake that kind of physicality. It's part of what makes the film's undead so unforgettable. Fact 15. It was almost just a made-for-TV movie. Before it became a theatrical release, the 1990 remake of Night of the Living Dead was originally pitched as a made-for-TV project. The plan was to bring Romero's story to cable audiences with a smaller budget and a tighter runtime. But once Columbia Pictures got involved, everything changed. The project ballooned into a theatrical feature with a wider scope, but the original TV DNA still lingers. The minimalist sets, smaller cast, and emphasis on character dynamics all reflect that earlier plan. It's why the film feels so contained, like a stage play with zombies. That limited scale worked in its favor, though. Rather than drowning in spectacle, the movie focuses on tension, paranoia, and raw survival. The irony, the film flopped at the box office, but found a second life in home video, the very market it was originally intended for. Fact 16. Real animal organs were used for gore. In an era before CG blood and digital entrails, filmmakers had to get creative. For Night of the Living Dead, Savini and his team turned to local butchers to get their hands on real animal organs, cow intestines, pig livers, and even sheep stomachs, to create stomach-turning realism in the zombie feast scenes. The smell? Absolutely foul. Some actors reportedly gagged while filming, and one nearly vomited when fake blood mixed with the warm guts. But Savini insisted on authenticity, believing that the tactile horror of real meat helped sell the illusion. The result was some of the most nauseating, visceral zombie chomping in early 90s horror. You can practically smell the decay through the screen, and that's not an accident. It's butcher shop horror filmmaking at its grimiest. Fact 17. The remake was a legal strategy to reclaim rights. Why remake Night of the Living Dead at all? Believe it or not, it wasn't just about updating a classic, it was about reclaiming rights. The original 1968 version accidentally fell into the public domain due to a copyright mistake. That meant anyone could distribute, alter, or profit from it without paying Romero or his team. The 1990 remake was, in part, a way to re-secure ownership of the brand and ensure future revenues. By creating a new version with proper copyright protections, Romero and company could reassert some control. It was less about nostalgia and more about legal strategy. And in a poetic twist, the remake, once dismissed, is now seen as a vital part of the franchise's legacy. It's the film that gave the creators back some power, even if it came through the undead. Fact 18. The score was modeled after the film Psycho. Composer Paul McCullough approached the film's score with one word in mind: unsettling. Rather than going for cheap jump scare stingers or a synth-heavy slasher cues, he looked to Bernard Herrmann's work on Psycho as inspiration. The result is a classical-style soundtrack filled with shrieking strings, droning low tones, and uncomfortable silences that stretch just long enough to get under your skin. Savini wanted the film to feel more timeless than trendy, and McCullough delivered a score that feels like it's slowly wrapping around your throat. In some scenes, the music completely disappears, letting the sound of creaking wood or distant moans carry the horror. It's a subtle touch, but one that elevates the film's atmosphere. This wasn't just zombie mayhem, it was psychological dread, with the music pulling the strings. Fact 19. The dialogue reflects the late 1980s political tension. Romero updated his original script for the 90s remake, but he didn't just change the words, he changed the message. The political tensions of the late 80s, rising distrust in government, growing gun culture, and deeper racial division seeped into the dialogue and character dynamics. Ben and Cooper's feud felt less like a clash of personalities and more like a metaphor for the crumbling middle ground in American society. Barbara's transformation from a passive victim to an assertive survivor echoed the feminist surge of the time. Even the redneck militia at the end felt like commentary on vigilante justice and rural paranoia. Romero didn't just want to retell a zombie story, he wanted to reframe it for a generation grappling with new fears, and the result is a film that feels eerily relevant even decades later. Fact 20. The film wasn't loved at first, but now it's a classic. When the 1990 remake hit theaters, it wasn't exactly welcomed with open arms. Critics called it unnecessary. Fans of the original were skeptical, and even Savini seemed burned by the experience. But something changed over the years. As horror fans revisited the film on VHS, DVD, and eventually streaming, appreciation began to grow. The performances, the atmosphere, and the underlying respect for Romero's themes all started getting recognition. Today, it's widely regarded as one of the best horror remakes ever made, praised for walking the tightrope between homage and reinvention. What was once dismissed has become a cult classic, and much like the zombies it portrays, the film refused to stay buried. It rose again, stronger, meaner, and more beloved than ever. So there you have it, 20 weird, wild, and downright shocking facts about Night of the Living Dead, 1990. From hidden cameos to real guts and lost footage, this remake packs way more than most fans ever realized. But we're just getting started. If you've got another horror classic you want us to dig into, whether it's a cult favorite, an overlooked gem, or a remake that deserves a second chance, drop your suggestions in the comments. We read every single one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Because around here, the dead never rest, and neither do we.